In a post-delivery haze from painkillers, I heard laughter in the hospital hallway, my husband's voice intertwined with an unfamiliar feminine one. I opened my eyes just in time to see my husband, Dr. Jonathan Mitchell, fresh off the cover of Psychology Today, his TED Talk on healing trauma at 3.2 million views, resting a far too familiar hand on the waist of a young Latina nurse. She leaned into him, Vanessa's voice clear and chilling. "Don't worry about her. The incision still hurts. The meds are strong. She won't know a thing." "Sarah," Jonathan gave a slight laugh, his tone icy. "She just stays home with the baby, lives off my money, naive and easy to control." I quickly shut my eyes as they walked past. Tears soaked my pillow. The wedding band on my finger suddenly felt as heavy as a verdict. Hi everyone. Please subscribe and stay to the end to follow my journey of revenge. Let me tell you about the life I thought I had. Jonathan and I met at Columbia. I was finishing my master's in communications. He was a rising star in the clinical psychology PhD program. He was brilliant, charismatic, the kind of person who could make you feel like the most important person in the room just by listening to you. We married 2 years later in a ceremony featured in the New York Times wedding section. My mother cried. His mother smiled, that tight, approving smile she reserved for things that met her standards. "You've done well, Jonathan," she'd said at the reception, adjusting his boutonniere. "Sarah comes from a good family. Solid professional credentials. She'll be an excellent partner for your career. Not she's wonderful or you love each other, an excellent partner for his career." I should have heard the warning in that. For 8 years, I played the role perfectly. I managed our home in Morningside Heights, the renovated brownstone his mother had helped us buy. I attended hospital fundraisers in designer dresses I could barely afford. I smiled for photos at medical conferences. I wrote press releases for St. Albans Communications Department, carefully crafting the hospital's public image while Jonathan built his private practice and research empire. I was useful, decorative, controlled, and I didn't even realize it. The control happened so gradually, I mistook it for love. It started with helpful suggestions. "That dress is a bit tight, don't you think? You want to look professional. And maybe you should let me handle the investments. I have the financial background." Then came the joint accounts he managed alone, the credit cards in my name that I barely used because he preferred I ask him first. The gradual isolation from friends who didn't understand our lifestyle or were too negative. By the time I got pregnant with Emma, I'd become a ghost in my own life. "Sarah, about the maternity leave," Jonathan had said over dinner one night. 6 months into my pregnancy, "I've been thinking maybe you should take a full year. The hospital will hold your position and we can certainly afford it." I was planning on 4 months. "Emma needs you." He'd reached across the table, taken my hand. "And honestly, the communications work is stressful. Not good for the baby. You've been so anxious lately." I wasn't anxious. I was pregnant. But somehow, by the end of that conversation, I'd agreed to a year. I didn't see it then, how he'd weaponized my love for our daughter against me, how he'd started building the narrative. Sarah's unstable. Sarah's overwhelmed. Sarah can't be trusted to make decisions. The power of attorney document appeared 3 weeks after Emma's birth. I was in the fog of sleep deprivation, sitting in our kitchen at 3 a.m. with a screaming baby and cracked nipples and tears streaming down my face, when Jonathan came downstairs. Hey, he'd soothed, taking Emma from me. "You're exhausted. Why don't you try to sleep?" "I can't. She won't latch. She's hungry and I can't." "You're doing great." He'd rocked Emma gently, and miraculously, she'd quieted. "Listen, I need you to sign something. Just a formality. Estate planning paperwork. Our lawyer recommended it now that we have Emma." He'd slid the document across the counter. My vision was blurred from crying and exhaustion, but I saw my name, saw power of attorney, saw in case of emergency. "It's standard for new parents," he'd continued. "If something happened to you, God forbid. I need to be able to access accounts, make medical decisions, handle things legally, and vice versa. It made sense. I'd signed it right there at the kitchen counter at 3 a.m., with Emma crying and milk leaking through my shirt, and my brain barely functioning. I'd signed away my financial autonomy, and I hadn't even known it. Now, standing in our home office at 7 a.m. on November 15th, staring at that $47,000 transfer, I finally understood what Jonathan had done. He'd waited until I was most vulnerable, most depleted, most likely to sign anything he put in front of me, and he'd used it to steal from us. But why? We had money, his practice was thriving, his research grants were substantial, my salary before maternity leave had been solid. Why move money into a mysterious LLC? I opened the next statement, another transfer, $35,000, same LLC, then another, $28,000, and another, $52,000. In 4 months, while I'd been home with Emma, barely sleeping, pumping every 3 hours, drowning in the fog of new motherhood, Jonathan had moved $162,000 out of our accounts. Using my forged signature, all authorized by the power of attorney I'd signed while holding our screaming baby. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone to call our bank. Then I stopped. If I confronted him directly, he'd just gaslight me again, produce paperwork, claim I'd forgotten conversations we'd never had, use my postpartum status against me. I needed help, real help. I needed a lawyer. Grace Park's office was in Midtown, a sleek space with glass walls and a view of Bryant Park. I'd found her through a women's networking group I'd joined during my pregnancy, back when I'd still had the energy to pretend I had a career to network for. Mrs. Mitchell! She shook my hand firmly, her grip confident. Your message said this was urgent. I'd called from a coffee shop, using a voice I barely recognized as my own. Steady, cold, precise. Now, sitting across from her, I felt that composure crack. My husband is stealing from me, I said, and I think he's going to try to make me look insane so I can't stop him. Grace didn't flinch, didn't look skeptical, just pulled out a legal pad and a pen. Tell me everything, she said, and I mean everything, even the parts that don't seem important. So I did. I told her about the woman in the therapy room, about Jonathan's gaslighting, about the power of attorney I'd signed at 3 a.m., about the transfers to the mysterious LLC, about his comments on my postpartum screening, his control over our finances, his mother's pointed remarks about my stability. Grace took notes in swift, efficient strokes. When I finished, she looked up. Mrs. Mitchell, Sarah, I'm going to be very direct with you. What you're describing is a pattern of financial abuse and psychological manipulation. The transfers alone could constitute fraud if he misrepresented the purpose of that power of attorney, but proving it will require careful documentation. I have bank statements. Good, but we need more. We need to establish a pattern, timeline everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every instance of him undermining your perception of reality. Get copies of those statements from the bank, through a subpoena if necessary. We'll need to trace where that money actually went. And the woman I saw, Grace's expression softened slightly. That's more complicated. Adultery matters in custody cases, but it's not a criminal issue. However, she tapped her pen against the pad. If she's an employee or a subordinate, if there's a power imbalance, that opens other doors. Workplace violations, ethical breaches if she's involved in his research, we can use that. How? First, we verify your timeline. Hospital badge logs show who entered what areas when. Security footage from the hallways. We'll need a subpoena for that too. But if what you saw really happened, the records will back you up. I felt something unlock in my chest. Someone believed me. There's something else, Grace said. That power of attorney, you said he told you it was estate planning. Yes. And you signed it while severely sleep-deprived under duress without independent legal counsel. Yes. That document might be voidable, lack of capacity, misrepresentation of purpose, but we'll need to move carefully if he realizes you're building a case. He'll accelerate whatever he's planning. What do you think he's planning? Grace met my eyes. Honestly, I think he's planning to make you look incompetent so he can maintain control while he moves assets you can't track. The question is, why does he need that money so badly that he's willing to commit fraud? I didn't have an answer, but I was going to find one. Grace gave me homework. Document everything, she'd said as I left her office. Every conversation with Jonathan, every financial transaction, every interaction with his mother. Keep a journal, date it, time stamp it. Save every email, every text. If he tries to gaslight you again, record it. New York is a one-party consent state. You can legally record conversations you're part of without telling him. Won't that make things worse? Worse than losing custody of your daughter because he's convinced a judge you're mentally unstable. Worse than watching him drain your accounts while you have no recourse. She'd handed me her card. Sarah, I've seen cases like this before. Men who use their professional credibility as a weapon. The best defense is evidence. Cold, hard, irrefutable evidence. So I became a detective in my own life. I started with the LLC, Cognitive Health Education Partners. A Google search turned up nothing. No website, no business listing, no public records. I searched the New York State Department of State database for business entities and found it. Incorporated 6 months ago. Registered agent listed as a P.O. box in Queens. The principal officer was Jonathan Mitchell, so he'd created a shell company. But for what? I went back through our bank statements, this time creating a spreadsheet. Every transfer to CHEP, categorized by date and amount. The pattern was clear. Small transfers at first, $5,000, $8,000, then escalating. The largest was $52,000 just 2 weeks ago. Total, $162,000 in 4 months. But our joint account wasn't the only source. I checked our investment accounts, the ones Jonathan managed alone. Another $89,000, moved in 3 transactions, all marked portfolio rebalancing. That was $251,000, $250,000, moved into an LLC I'd never heard of, using paperwork I'd signed while barely conscious. My hands were shaking as I printed everything. Bank statements, LLC registration, investment account summaries. I put them in a folder labeled Emma's Photos and hid it in the diaper bag. Then I did something that terrified me. I called Jonathan's office. Mitchell's Psychological Research Group. This is Olivia speaking. I recognized the voice. Olivia Tran, the research coordinator. We'd met at a holiday party 2 years ago. She'd been warm, friendly, asked thoughtful questions about my work at the hospital. Hi, Olivia, it's Sarah Mitchell. Is Jonathan available? Oh, Sarah, he's in a session right now. Can I take a message? Actually, I was hoping to ask you something. It's about the research grants. I'm trying to organize some tax documents, and I need to know which grants are currently active. A pause. Then, cautiously, I'm not sure I should discuss that without Dr. Mitchell's. It's just for tax purposes. Our accountant needs a list. I kept my voice light, casual. The NIH one, obviously, and I think there's one from the American Psychological Foundation. Yes, those 2, and the Cognitive Development Grant from the National Science Foundation. That one's new this year. Right when the transfers to CHEP started. Perfect. And those funds go into the research group's account, right? Not personal accounts? Another pause, longer this time. Sarah, is everything okay? I'd pushed too far. Everything's fine, just trying to get organized. You know how tax season is. Right. Well, if you need anything else, maybe talk directly to Dr. Mitchell. Of course. Thanks, Olivia. I hung up. heart pounding. But I'd learned something important. Jonathan had received a significant grant right when the transfers started, and Olivia had sounded nervous when I'd asked about accounts. Something was very, very wrong. That night, after Emma was asleep and Jonathan was in his study working, I opened his laptop. I know, it was a violation of trust, illegal depending on how you looked at it, morally ambiguous at best, but he'd forged my signature, stolen our money, gaslighted me into questioning my own sanity. So I guessed his password, Emma's birth date, plus his mother's initials, and I was in. His email was a goldmine. I started with the sent folder, searching CHEP. 3 results. The first was to his accountant. Set up the LLC as discussed. Education consulting is a legitimate tax shelter, and with the grant overhead, we can run expenses through it to minimize liability. Tax shelter. So CHEP wasn't just a theft, it was tax fraud. The second email was to someone named Marcus Reed at First National Bank. Transfer approved. The consulting fees are documented. Just make sure the paperwork shows spousal authorization per the POA. Spousal authorization. My forged signature. The third email made my blood run cold. It was to his mother. Mother, I've moved the funds as we discussed. S is too distracted with the baby to notice, and even if she did, the postpartum evaluation gives us cover. The attorney confirmed that if we need to pursue incompetency proceedings, we have documentation. The practice is secure and the house remains protected under your name as co-signer. Everything is proceeding as planned. Sent 3 months ago. I read it again and again. Incompetency proceedings. Your name as co-signer. Everything is proceeding as planned. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was a coordinated plan. Jonathan and his mother working together, systematically dismantling my financial independence while building a legal case that I was mentally unfit. And I'd walked right into it by signing that power of attorney. I took photos of everything with my phone, uploaded them to a cloud account Jonathan didn't know about. Then I dug deeper. In his documents folder, I found something labeled Practice Acquisition Materials. Inside, business plans, financial projections, and loan applications. Jonathan was trying to buy out his partners and take full ownership of Mitchell Psychological Research Group. The purchase price, $1.2 million. He'd secured a loan for $900,000. The remaining $300,000 was coming from personal assets and consulting revenue. Personal assets, our money. Consulting revenue, the fake LLC. He was using our joint savings, our investments, our future, to fund a business acquisition without telling me, without asking permission. And when I inevitably discovered it, he'd use the power of attorney to claim I'd agreed, and if I pushed back, he'd use the postpartum evaluation to claim I was incompetent. It was brilliant. It was evil, and I'd almost missed it. I printed everything, every email, every document, every bank transfer record. I put it all in a second folder, this one labelled Emma's Medical Records, and hid it in the bottom of the diaper bag. Then I closed the laptop, cleared the browser history, and went to bed. Jonathan came in around midnight, smelling of scotch and that same floral perfume. "You're still awake," he said, surprised. "Couldn't sleep." Emma was fussy. He sat on the edge of the bed, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something. Guilt? Concern? "Sarah, I know things have been hard lately, with Emma, with your leave from work. I just want you to know I'm here. I'm taking care of things. Taking care of things. By stealing from me. I appreciate that," I said, and I kept my voice soft, grateful, the way he expected. He kissed my forehead and went to the bathroom, and I lay in the dark, planning my next move. The next morning, I called Grace from a coffee shop 3 blocks from our house. "I found it," I said. "All of it. The shell company, the practice acquisition, emails between Jonathan and his mother planning this months ago. He's been systematically moving our money to fund a business deal, and he's been building a case that I'm mentally incompetent in case I find out." "Sarah, slow down. Did you? I photographed everything. I have emails, bank records, loan applications. It's all in the cloud. A long pause. How did you access his laptop? I guessed his password. Sarah. Grace's voice was careful now. That's legally problematic, depending on how a judge views it. Those emails might not be admissible. Unauthorized access to electronic communications. He forged my signature. I know and will prove that, but we have to be smart about this. We can't let him claim you're unstable and also hand him evidence that you violated his privacy. We need clean evidence, subpoenaed records, forensic analysis, things that will stand up in court. My hands were shaking around my coffee cup. So what do I do? First, transfer those photos to a secure drive and give it to me. I'll review everything and figure out what's admissible and what we need to obtain through legal channels. Second, do not confront him. Not yet. If he knows you're onto him, he'll hide evidence. Third, we need to file for an emergency evaluation of that power of attorney. Claim lack of capacity, misrepresentation. Get a judge to freeze those accounts before he moves more money. How long will that take? If we file tomorrow, we can probably get an emergency hearing within 2 weeks. But Sarah, this is going to get ugly. When we file, he'll know you're fighting back. He'll escalate. Are you prepared for that? Was I? I thought of Emma, asleep in her crib at home. I thought of Jonathan's email to his mother, talking about me like I was a problem to be managed. I thought of the woman in the therapy room and the $251,000 stolen from our accounts, and the life I'd thought I was building. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. Good, because from here on out we're at war. The subpoena for the hospital badge logs came back on December the 1st. Grace had worked fast, filing motions under seal to prevent Jonathan from being tipped off. She'd argued that badge access records were essential to verifying disputed claims regarding workplace conduct and had gotten a sympathetic judge. The records arrived as a PDF. Every badge swipe for the 4th floor of St. Albans Hospital on November 14th. I spread the printout on Grace's conference table, my hands steady now, clinical, cold. Here, I said, pointing, 11:14 p.m. Dr. Jonathan Mitchell, badge 4782, accessed the 4th floor research wing, main entrance. Grace leaned in, and I slid my finger down the page. 11:17 p.m. Olivia Tran, badge 3891, same entrance. Olivia Tran, that's the research coordinator you spoke to. Yes, Grace made a note. So they both accessed the wing. What about exits? I found the next entry. 12:43 a.m. Dr. Mitchell exits. 12:46 a.m. Olivia Tran exits. An hour and a half. Together. In the research wing, with the therapy room light on. He said he was in a grant meeting, I said quietly, on the 2nd floor with Dr. Rios and the department chair. Do you have his exact words? I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo I'd started keeping after that first night. I was in a grant meeting until midnight with Dr. Rios and the department chair. We were in the conference room on the 2nd floor, nowhere near the therapy wing. Grace listened to the recording, then checked the badge log again. There's no record of him accessing the 2nd floor that night. And look, she pointed to another section. Dr. Ethan Rios and Department Chair Patricia Whitmore both left the building at 6:47 p.m. They weren't there. He lied. He lied under circumstances where he assumed there would be no way to verify his story. That's important. It shows consciousness of guilt. Grace made more notes. Now we need to confirm the therapy room itself. I've filed for security footage from the hallway. If the judge grants it, we'll have visual confirmation. What about the woman? Olivia? That's complicated. If she's involved with him consensually, it's a workplace ethics issue, but not necessarily illegal. However, Grace pulled up another document on her laptop. St. Albans has strict fraternization policies. Supervisors can't have relationships with direct reports. Dr. Mitchell oversees the research coordinators. Yes. Then he's violated hospital policy. That's grounds for termination, possibly for losing his staff privileges, but more importantly, for our case, it establishes a pattern of deception and abuse of power. That matters in custody evaluations. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. What's next? Next, we follow the money. I've filed subpoenas for the bank records of Cognitive Health Education Partners, the LLC. We'll see where the money actually went, and I've hired a forensic accountant to analyse the practice acquisition deal. If Jonathan's been commingling marital assets with business funds without your knowledge, that's financial misconduct. How much is this going to cost? Grace's expression softened. Sarah, your case is strong. Once we establish fraud and prove the power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses, we can petition the court to make Jonathan responsible for your legal fees. You're the wronged party here. But until then, I'm willing to work on contingency for the divorce portion. The criminal referrals, if we find evidence of wire fraud or tax evasion, those would go to the DA or IRS, and you wouldn't be responsible for those investigations. Criminal referrals, wire fraud, tax evasion. This had gone so far beyond a cheating husband. Grace, I just want to protect my daughter and get my life back. I know, but to do that, we have to expose everything, all of it. Are you ready for that? I thought about Emma, about the life I wanted to give her. A life where truth mattered, where manipulation didn't win. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The security footage arrived 3 days later. Grace had gotten a court order for hallway cameras from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on November 14th. We watched it together in her office, the timestamp running in the corner. 11:14 p.m. Jonathan appears, walking down the hallway with confident strides. He looks at his watch, adjusts his tie. 11:17 p.m. Olivia appears from the opposite direction. She's carrying a tablet and a folder. They meet at the door to the therapy suite. Jonathan says something we can't hear, but she laughs. He touches her waist as he opens the door with his badge. They disappear inside. The hallway stays empty for nearly 90 minutes. I watch the timestamp tick by 11:25, 11:43, 12:08. At 12:32 a.m., the door opens briefly. Olivia steps out, her hair down now, not in the bun from earlier. She looks both ways, then goes back inside. At 12:43 a.m., Jonathan exits. He looks composed, professional, checks his phone, walks away. At 12:46 a.m., Olivia exits. She pauses outside the door, touches her lips, then heads in the opposite direction. Grace paused the video. That's your evidence, she said. Time-stamped video of them entering together, staying for 90 minutes, and leaving separately, combined with the badge logs and his false statement about where he was. This establishes deception. But it doesn't show what they were doing inside. No, but the circumstances speak for themselves. And more importantly, Grace pulled up another document. I've been doing research on hospital policies. That therapy room. It has an observation window, one-way glass. You said you saw them through it. Yes. Then the room was in observation mode, which means the lights inside were on, but the hallway side appeared dark. That's a therapeutic setup. It's supposed to be used for supervising student therapists, not for private meetings. The fact that they were in there at all, after hours, with the observation setup active, that's a violation of patient privacy protocols, even if no patients were present. So it gives us grounds to file a complaint with the hospital's ethics board, not just for fraternization, but for misuse of clinical spaces. And if they're investigating Jonathan for ethics violations, that affects his credibility in our custody case. I stared at the frozen image, Olivia's hand touching her lips, that small, private gesture. She's so young, I said quietly. Yes, and that matters too. He's a senior attending physician and researcher. She's a coordinator, probably early in her career. The power imbalance is significant. Even if she thinks it's consensual, there are questions about whether someone in his position can have a truly consensual relationship with a subordinate. You think he coerced her. I think he's a man who uses his power to get what he wants, whether that's his wife's signature on a fraudulent power of attorney or a subordinate's compliance with an inappropriate relationship. Grace closed her laptop. Sarah, I'm going to file 3 things tomorrow. First, an emergency motion to void the power of attorney based on lack of capacity and misrepresentation. Second, a motion to freeze all accounts associated with CHEP pending investigation. Third, a formal complaint to St Albans Ethics Board regarding Dr. Mitchell's conduct. And then he'll know we're coming. The explosion happened on December 8th. I was at home with Emma when my phone rang. Grace, her voice tight. He filed first. My stomach dropped. Filed what? A petition for emergency temporary sole custody. He's claiming you're suffering from severe postpartum depression with psychotic features, that you've been making paranoid accusations, exhibiting erratic behavior, and that you pose a risk to Emma's well-being. The room tilted. He can't. I haven't. Sarah, breathe. This is a predictable move. He knows we're about to file, so he's trying to preempt us. He's attached affidavits from his mother and from a Dr. Helena Voss, a psychiatrist at St Albans, stating that you exhibited concerning symptoms during your postpartum evaluation. Dr. Voss never said I was a danger to Emma. The screening was standard. Every new mother gets it. I know, but he's weaponizing it. He's also claiming you've been obsessively checking bank accounts, making accusations of infidelity and exhibiting paranoia about financial matters. Obsessively checking our accounts. After he stole $251,000, making accusations of infidelity. After I literally watched him with another woman. Paranoia about financial matters. After he committed fraud. This is insane. It's calculated. He's flipping the narrative, making your investigation into his misconduct look like symptoms of mental illness. It's classic Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. What do? We fight. We file our motions immediately. We submit all our evidence, and we request an independent psychological evaluation for both of you. A neutral third party will assess both parents and make a recommendation to the court. But what if they believe him? He's a renowned psychologist. His mother is testifying for him. They have a psychiatrist saying, I'm unstable. And we have badge logs proving he lied about his whereabouts. Bank records showing he committed fraud. Security footage showing he violated hospital policy. And your cooperation with an independent evaluation will demonstrate that you have nothing to hide. Grace paused. Sarah, here's the hard truth. This is going to get worse before it gets better. He's going to try to paint you as crazy. He has resources, reputation, and he's willing to lie. But you have the truth, and in my experience, the truth wins. But you have to trust the process. Can you do that? I looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her bouncer, unaware that her parents were about to go to war over her. I can do that. The emergency hearing was set for December 15th, exactly 1 week away. Grace went into overdrive. She filed counter motions, submitted evidence packets, deposed Jonathan's mother and Dr. Voss. She hired Dr. Patricia Reeves, a forensic psychologist from Columbia, to conduct independent evaluations of both Jonathan and me. Dr. Reeves is the best, Grace explained. She's testified in over 200 custody cases. Courts trust her. She won't be swayed by reputation or credentials. She follows the evidence. Meanwhile, I lived in a nightmare. Jonathan moved out, claiming he needed space to protect himself from Sarah's instability. He took up residence in a hotel near the hospital, playing the wounded husband to anyone who would listen. His mother called me daily. Sarah, dear, I'm worried about you. Jonathan says you've been making wild accusations. This isn't like you. I saw him with another woman, Catherine. Jonathan explained that. You were confused, sleep-deprived. He was in a meeting. Darling, you need help, for Emma's sake. The badge logs prove he was lying. A pause, then ice cold. The badge logs prove he was in the building. They don't prove whatever paranoid fantasy you've constructed. Sarah, if you continue down this path, you're going to lose everything. Your daughter, your home, your reputation. Is that really what you want? I want the truth. The truth is that you're unwell. And if you can't see that, then perhaps Jonathan is right to be concerned about Emma's safety. I hung up, but the calls kept coming. From Jonathan's colleagues, mutual friends, people from the hospital, all expressing concern about my behaviour, all suggesting I needed help, all implying I was unstable. The whisper campaign was working. December 12th, I met with Dr. Reeves for my evaluation. She was in her late 50s, with kind eyes and an absolutely uncompromising demeanour. We met in her office in Lower Manhattan. 4 hours of clinical interviews, psychological testing and structured assessments. Tell me about the night of November 14th, she said. In your own words, I told her everything. The breast pump, the hospital hallway, the observation window, Jonathan's gaslighting, the badge logs, the security footage. She took notes without judgment, without reaction. And prior to this incident, had you ever experienced hallucinations or paranoid ideation? No. Have you been diagnosed with any mental health conditions? Postpartum anxiety, mild. I was seeing a therapist briefly, talk therapy, no medication. And the postpartum depression screening Dr. Mitchell is referencing. It was standard. Every new mother at St Albans takes the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. I scored a 12, borderline, indicating some anxiety and sleep deprivation, but not clinical depression and certainly not psychosis. Dr. Reeves made a note. Tell me about your relationship with your husband prior to Emma's birth. I thought carefully. I thought it was good. He was successful, charming, attentive, at least in public. But looking back, there were patterns. He made all the financial decisions. He discouraged me from staying close to friends he didn't approve of. He subtly undermined my confidence. Little comments about my weight, my career, my judgment. I thought he was being helpful. Now I see it as control. And the power of attorney you signed. I signed it at 3 a.m. while holding a screaming baby and crying from exhaustion. He told me it was estate planning standard for new parents. I didn't read it carefully. I didn't have a lawyer review it. I just trusted him. Do you regret that? Yes, but I don't think that makes me incompetent. I think it makes me a new mother who was manipulated by someone she loved. Dr. Reeves looked at me for a long moment. Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you. Dr. Mitchell is a very skilled psychologist. He knows how to present a case. He knows how to use clinical language to make normal behavior sound pathological. When I evaluate him, I'm going to be looking for signs of that manipulation, but I need you to understand. This process is designed to be neutral. I may uncover things you don't like. I may ask uncomfortable questions. Can you handle that? Yes. Good, because the truth is the only thing that will protect your daughter. December 13th. Grace called with news. The forensic accountant finished her analysis. Sarah, this is bigger than we thought. How much bigger? Jonathan didn't just move $251,000 from your personal accounts. He's been systematically siphoning money from his research grants. The NIH grant alone, he's billed for patient sessions that never happened, claimed expenses for equipment that was never purchased, and paid himself consulting fees from grant overhead that should have gone to the hospital. That's fraud. Federal fraud. Grant money is federally funded. Misuse of NIH funds is a federal crime. I've referred the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're opening an investigation. My head spun. What does that mean for the custody case? It means Jonathan Mitchell is about to have much bigger problems than a divorce. But it also means we need to be careful. Once the feds get involved, everything becomes evidence. We can't do anything that might compromise their investigation. What about Emma? The emergency hearing is still on for December 15th. Dr. Reeves will present her findings. We'll present the badge logs, the security footage, the evidence of financial fraud, and we'll ask the judge for an order protecting Emma while the larger investigation unfolds. Do you think we'll win? Grace hesitated. I think the evidence is on our side. But Sarah, family court is unpredictable. Judges are conservative when it comes to children. They want stability. Jonathan is going to argue that keeping Emma with him provides that stability, that you're the disruptive element. We need to prove that he's the danger, not you. How do we do that? We need someone on the inside. Someone who can testify to his behavior, his manipulation, his abuse of power. Someone he can't discredit. Who? Olivia Tran. I stared at Grace. The woman he was with? She'll never testify against him. Maybe not, but I've been doing some research. Olivia's not just a research coordinator. She's a doctoral student. She needs Jonathan's recommendation for her dissertation committee. He has power over her career. That's not a consensual relationship. That's exploitation. So if we can show her that testifying against him will actually protect her career, that staying silent makes her complicit in his fraud, she might flip. That's a huge gamble. It is, but there's something else. Grace pulled up an email on her laptop. This came in this morning. Anonymous tip to the hospital ethics hotline. Someone reported that Dr. Mitchell has been pressuring research assistants to falsify patient consent forms for his studies, claiming patients agreed to participate when they didn't, or forging signatures. Who sent it? It's anonymous, but the tipster mentioned specific patient IDs and dates. Someone with access to the research database, Olivia, or someone else in the research group. Either way, the hospital has to investigate, and if they find evidence of consent fraud, Jonathan's career is over. His medical license, his research privileges, everything. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Grace, what if Olivia's not the only one he's manipulated? What if there are other assistants, other students, other victims? Grace smiled, a sharp, predatory smile. Then we find them and we give them a reason to speak. The call came at 11 p.m. on December 13th, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Mitchell, the voice was female, young, shaking. This is Olivia Tran. We need to talk. We met at a 24-hour diner in Queens, far from the hospital and anyone who might recognize us. Olivia looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like a lifeline. I saw the ethics complaint, she said without preamble. The hospital called me in for an interview. They asked about patient consent forms, about my relationship with Dr. Mitchell, about the badge logs from November 14th. What did you tell them? The truth, that I was with him that night, that we've been involved for 6 months, that he told me it was okay, that the hospital policies didn't apply to us because we were partners, not supervisor and subordinate. She looked up at me and I saw shame and anger and fear all mixed together. I was an idiot. No, you were manipulated by someone with power over you. I should have known better. I'm 27 years old. I have a master's degree. I'm not some naive kid. He's a psychologist. Manipulation is literally his profession. Olivia laughed, a bitter sound. You know what's funny? When I first met him, he was so kind, so interested in my work. He said I had remarkable insight and that he wanted to mentor me. It felt special, like he really saw me. I knew that feeling, that intoxication of being seen by someone brilliant and powerful. When did it change? Gradually, little things at first, asking me to stay late to discuss research, standing too close, complimenting my appearance in ways that felt a little too personal. Then one night, we were working late on a grant proposal and he kissed me. She stared into her coffee. I knew it was wrong, but he was so convincing. He said the hospital policies were outdated, that we were both adults, that what we did in private was no one's business, and I believed him because I wanted to. Did he ever ask you to do anything else, anything unethical? A long pause. He asked me to adjust patient consent forms, not forge them, just make the language less specific. He said some patients had verbally consented but hadn't fully understood the written forms, so we were just clarifying things. I didn't realize he was changing them after the fact. Olivia, that's falsification of research data. That's a federal crime if the research is federally funded. I know that now. Her hands were shaking. When the ethics committee asked me about it, I panicked. I told them I didn't know anything, but Mrs. Mitchell, Sarah, they have the original forms. They have backups. They're going to find out I lied. So tell them the truth. If I do, my career is over. I'll lose my position, my dissertation committee, any chance of getting my PhD. And Dr. Mitchell, he'll destroy me. He has emails, texts, evidence of our relationship. He'll make it look like I seduced him, like I was the one who falsified the forms to get his approval. Or, I said carefully, you could tell the truth first. You could testify about what he asked you to do, how he manipulated you, how he used his position to coerce you. You could be the whistleblower instead of the accomplice. Olivia looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Why would I do that? What's in it for me? Immunity. My lawyer can negotiate with the U.S. Attorney's Office. If you cooperate fully, if you provide evidence and testimony, they'll protect you. You might lose your position at St. Albans, but you won't go to prison. And more importantly, I leaned forward, you'll be free of him. She started crying then, quiet sobs that shook her whole body. I loved him. How stupid is that? I actually loved him. It's not stupid. It's human. And he took advantage of that. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. What do you need from me? Olivia agreed to meet with Grace the next morning. She brought everything, emails, texts, copies of the consent forms she'd adjusted at Jonathan's request, a detailed timeline of their relationship and his requests for unethical behavior. But the real bombshell came when Grace asked, was there anyone else, any other students or assistants Dr. Mitchell was involved with? Olivia hesitated. There was someone, before me, a doctoral student named Maria Solis. She left the program suddenly about 2 years ago. There were rumours, but no one talked about it openly. Do you know how to reach her? I have her email. We stayed in touch a little. She was always kind to me. I think she tried to warn me once, actually. She said something about being careful around Dr. Mitchell, that he wasn't who he appeared to be. I didn't listen. Grace exchanged a look with me. Can you contact her? See if she'd be willing to talk? I can try. Maria Solis agreed to a phone call that afternoon. Her voice was guarded, careful. Olivia said you're Dr. Mitchell's wife. His ex-wife? Soon-to-be ex-wife. I'm building a case against him for fraud, manipulation, abuse of power. I need to know what he did to you. A long silence. Why should I help you? Why should I relive the worst year of my life to help someone I don't know? Because there are other women, Olivia's one. There will be more after her if we don't stop him. And because he's trying to take my daughter away from me by claiming I'm mentally unstable. If he succeeds, he'll have complete control over another vulnerable person. Another silence. Then, he was my dissertation advisor. I was 24. Excited about my research, grateful to be working with someone so renowned. He told me I was brilliant, that I had a future in academic psychology, that he wanted to help me succeed. I closed my eyes. The pattern was so clear now. It started professionally, long meetings to discuss my work, then dinners to network, then late-night calls where he'd tell me about his unhappy marriage, how his wife didn't understand him. I was young, stupid. I fell for it. You weren't stupid. You were victimized. Maybe both can be true. Her voice was bitter. The relationship lasted 8 months. During that time, he convinced me to include some of his unpublished research in my dissertation, said it would strengthen my thesis, that he'd credit me as co-author when he published. I found out later he'd stolen that research from another student who'd left the program. What happened? I tried to end it, said I wanted to focus on my work, that the relationship was making me uncomfortable. He told me that if I broke things off, he'd fail my dissertation defense, that he'd make sure I never got my PhD, that he'd tell people I'd plagiarized using his stolen research as evidence. So you left. I left, abandoned 5 years of work, switched to a different program at a different school, started over from scratch. I got my PhD eventually, but it took 3 extra years and I'm drowning in debt. And Dr. Mitchell, he just moved on to the next bright young student who couldn't see what he was. Maria's voice broke. If I testify, if I go public with this, everyone will know. My current employer, my colleagues, future students. They'll Google my name and find out I had an affair with my advisor, that I was dumb enough to be manipulated, that I ran away instead of fighting. Or they'll see that you were brave enough to speak up, that you protected other women by telling your story. Will they, though? Or will they just see another woman who couldn't keep a professional boundary? I didn't have a good answer to that. Maria, I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise there won't be judgment or backlash, but I can promise that staying silent means he wins. He gets to keep his career, his reputation, his power, and he gets to do this to someone else. A long, long pause. Then, what do you need from me? The emergency hearing on December 15th was supposed to be procedural, a temporary custody arrangement until the full divorce trial. It turned into a public execution. Jonathan arrived with 3 attorneys. Grace had expected one, and a parade of character witnesses. His mother, immaculately dressed. Dr. Helena Voss, the psychiatrist. 2 colleagues from St. Albans. Even our couples therapist from 2 years ago, dragged out to testify about my anxiety issues. They built a case. Sarah Mitchell was unstable, paranoid, obsessive. She made wild accusations against her respected husband. She violated his privacy by accessing his computer. She harassed hospital staff with bizarre questions about badge logs and security footage. She dragged their marriage into sordid public litigation rather than seeking appropriate mental health treatment. Your Honour, Jonathan's lead attorney, a silver-haired shark named Robert Chen, said with perfect false sympathy, "We're not here to demonize Mrs. Mitchell. We're here because Dr. Mitchell, as a mental health professional, recognized that his wife is experiencing a significant psychological crisis. Rather than abandoning her, he's trying to ensure she gets help while protecting their infant daughter from potential harm." Grace stood. "Your Honour, the respondent has submitted extensive documentation proving that Dr. Mitchell systematically defrauded Mrs. Mitchell, lied about his whereabouts, engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, and falsified research records. Rather than addressing these serious allegations, he's attempting to weaponize his professional credentials to paint the victim of his misconduct as mentally ill. This is textbook DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender." Judge Patricia Brennan, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, looked up from the motion papers. "Ms. Park, you've submitted quite a lot of material here. Badge logs, security footage, bank statements, forensic accounting reports. This court typically doesn't delve into marital financial disputes in emergency custody hearings. Respectfully, Your Honour, the financial fraud is relevant because it establishes a pattern of deception and manipulation. Dr. Mitchell fraudulently obtained a power of attorney from Mrs. Mitchell. When she was severely sleep-deprived 3 weeks postpartum, then used that authority to steal over $250,000 from their joint accounts. This demonstrates both his willingness to exploit vulnerable people and his lack of credibility when he claims to be acting in his wife's best interest. Robert Chen shot to his feet. Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell voluntarily signed that power of attorney after consultation with family counsel. The notion that this was fraud is simply another manifestation of her paranoid ideation. As Dr. Voss will testify, Mrs. Mitchell's behavior is consistent with postpartum psychosis. I don't have postpartum psychosis, I said, surprising myself. Judge Brennan looked at me sharply. Mrs. Mitchell, you'll have an opportunity to testify. For now, please let your attorney speak. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I can't sit here and let them say I'm psychotic when I'm not. I saw what I saw. I have evidence, and I'm not going to be silent while my husband lies about me to take my daughter away. The courtroom went very quiet. Judge Brennan studied me for a long moment. Mrs. Mitchell, do you consent to an independent psychological evaluation by a court-appointed expert? Yes, absolutely yes. And Dr. Mitchell, will you also consent to evaluation? Jonathan looked at his attorneys. Robert Chen whispered something. Jonathan's face went tight, but he nodded. Of course, Your Honor, I have nothing to hide. Good, Judge Brennan made a note. I'm ordering both parties to undergo evaluation by Dr. Patricia Reeves within the next 72 hours. In the meantime, we have an infant who needs care. Ms. Park, you've argued that temporary sole custody to Dr. Mitchell would be inappropriate. What arrangement are you proposing? Temporary shared custody, Your Honor, with Mrs. Mitchell as primary residential parent. Dr. Mitchell would have supervised visitation given the pending investigations into his conduct. Robert Chen objected loudly. Your Honor, Dr. Mitchell is a licensed psychologist with zero history of violence or neglect. There is no basis for Zushka's supervised visitation. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mitchell has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior. Mr. Chen, I've read your papers. I've also read Ms. Park's papers, including sworn affidavits from 2 women alleging that Dr. Mitchell used his professional position to coerce them into inappropriate relationships and unethical conduct. Until I have Dr. Reeves's evaluation and can assess the credibility of these claims, I'm not comfortable granting sole custody to either parent. She turned to her clerk. Draft an order, temporary shared physical custody, week on, week off. No overnight visits for Dr. Mitchell until supervised visitation evaluation is complete. Emergency protective order prohibiting either party from disparaging the other to third parties or on social media. Both parties to complete psychological evaluations within 72 hours. Full hearing on custody and divorce matters to be scheduled within 45 days. The gavel came down. Jonathan's face had gone white. His attorneys huddled around him, but I could see the cracks forming. Because Judge Brennan had done something Jonathan hadn't anticipated. She'd taken him seriously enough to investigate. And once you started digging into Jonathan Mitchell's life, the whole house of cards came tumbling down. We were in the courthouse hallway when it happened. Robert Chen pulled Grace aside, his voice low and urgent. Ms. Park, my client is willing to discuss settlement terms. Grace raised an eyebrow. Your client just spent 3 hours arguing that my client is mentally incompetent. What changed in the last 5 minutes? The judge's order, Dr. Mitchell feels it would be in everyone's best interest to avoid protracted litigation. He's prepared to offer joint legal custody, primary physical custody to Mrs. Mitchell, and a generous financial settlement. How generous? Full equitable distribution of marital assets, spousal support for 3 years, child support per guidelines, and Dr. Mitchell will not contest Mrs. Mitchell's petition for divorce. Grace crossed her arms. And in exchange, Mrs. Mitchell drops all allegations of fraud agrees not to cooperate with any criminal investigations, and signs a mutual non-disparagement agreement. So he wants to buy her silence. He wants to resolve this matter privately and minimize harm to their daughter. Grace turned to me. Sarah, it's your call. This is actually a good offer financially. You'd get primary custody, you'd get a significant settlement, and you'd avoid months of litigation, but you'd have to walk away from the criminal case. The U.S. attorney would continue their investigation, but without your cooperation, it would be much harder to prosecute. I thought about Olivia, crying in that diner, about Maria, who'd lost 3 years of her life because she was too afraid to fight back, about every woman who'd been silenced by a powerful man who knew how to game the system. No, Grace smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. She turned back to Robert Chen. Counteroffer. Dr. Mitchell agrees to voluntary supervised visitation, undergoes the psychological evaluation without contest, cooperates fully with all investigations including the U.S. Attorney's Office, and provides a full accounting of all financial transactions for the past 3 years. In exchange, Mrs. Mitchell won't pursue additional civil damages beyond equitable distribution. Chen's face darkened. That's not a settlement, that's surrender. That's the truth. Your client can either face it voluntarily or wait for the judge to order it. Either way, the reckoning is coming. Chen looked at Jonathan, who stood 10 feet away, surrounded by his mother and his colleagues. Jonathan's mask had finally slipped. I could see the desperation underneath, the fear of a man who'd never faced real consequences in his life. We'll see you in court, Chen said coldly. Looking forward to it, Grace replied. That night, I was home alone with Emma, my first night of our week-on custody arrangement, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. This time, it was a text. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dr. Ethan Rios. We met briefly at hospital events. I need to speak with you about Dr. Mitchell's research practices. Can we meet somewhere private? I stared at the message. Dr. Ethan Rios, Jonathan's research collaborator, the man Jonathan had claimed to be with during his alibi for November 14th. I texted back, "How do I know this is really you?" Response came immediately, "You don't. But if you check the badge logs you subpoenaed, you'll see I left the building at 6:47 p.m. that night. Which means Dr. Mitchell lied about being in a meeting with me. I have more information like that, a lot more. Can we meet?" My heart was pounding. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Grace Park's office, address following. I'll be there. I forwarded the exchange to Grace immediately, then sat in the dark nursery, watching Emma sleep. The house of cards was falling, and I was about to find out just how deep the corruption went. Dr. Ethan Rios was 34 years old, looked 50, and carried the weight of moral compromise in every line of his face. He sat in Grace's conference room, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, staring at a USB drive on the table between us. "Before I say anything else, I need immunity," he said quietly. "Full immunity from criminal prosecution. Because what's on this drive, I was part of it. Not willingly at first, but I didn't stop it, and that makes me complicit." Grace, who'd brought in a prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office named David Kim for this meeting, nodded slowly. "Tell us what we're looking at. Then we'll talk about immunity." Ethan took a breath. "I've worked with Dr. Mitchell for 6 years. At first, it was a dream opportunity. He's brilliant, well-connected, bringing in major grants. I was a postdoc, then a junior researcher, grateful to be on his team. When did it change? About 3 years ago. He started pushing us to recruit more patient subjects for the studies, said we needed bigger sample sizes to get significant results. The problem was, we weren't finding enough eligible participants, so he told us to be creative with the inclusion criteria. Meaning we enrolled people who didn't really qualify, expanded age ranges, loosened diagnostic requirements, that kind of thing. It felt wrong, but he said it was pragmatic research design, that academic standards were too rigid. David Kim made notes. Did you document this? I have emails. They're on the drive, but that's not the worst part. Ethan pushed the USB drive toward us. 6 months ago, Dr. Mitchell started billing for patient sessions that didn't happen. He'd see someone once, get their insurance information, then submit claims for weekly sessions for months. The insurance companies paid out, and the money went into the research group's general account, which Dr. Mitchell controlled. How much money? Over the last year? Probably $400,000 in fraudulent billing, maybe more. I didn't have access to all the accounts. Grace and David exchanged looks. And you have evidence of this? I have billing records, patient schedules showing gaps, email instructions from Dr. Mitchell telling the office manager which codes to use for maximum reimbursement. I have Slack messages where he joked about ghost patients paying for new equipment. My stomach turned. The research grants, I said. He was stealing from those too, wasn't he? Ethan nodded miserably. The NIH grant for the cognitive development study. He claimed we needed specialized software, $85,000. We never bought it. He claimed equipment upgrades, $62,000. We never got them. The money was transferred to Cognitive Health Education Partners, that LLC he controls. He said it was for consulting services, but there were no consultants. It was just him, moving federal grant money into his personal slush fund. Why didn't you report this? David Kim asked, his voice sharp. Because I was terrified. Dr. Mitchell made it clear that if anyone went to the authorities, he'd blame us. He'd say we were the ones falsifying records, that we'd done it without his knowledge. He's got enough emails delegating tasks that he could claim plausible deniability. And he reminded us constantly that he had the credibility, renowned psychologist, published researcher, hospital leadership. Who would they believe? Him or a bunch of junior researchers? So what changed? Grace asked. Ethan looked at me directly for the first time. Your case. When I heard Dr. Mitchell was trying to claim you were mentally unstable, when I saw him building that narrative, I recognized the pattern. He does this. When someone threatens to expose him, he discredits them first. He did it to Maria Solis when she tried to leave his research group, spread rumors that she was unreliable, that her work was sloppy. She left academia entirely. He's doing it to me now, I said quietly. Yes, and when I realized you were fighting back, that you had evidence that you might actually expose him, I had to make a choice. Stay complicit and maybe go down with him. Or come forward and at least try to do the right thing. Ethan's hands were shaking. I'm not a bad person. I didn't want to be part of this, but he's so convincing, so authoritative. He made it seem like everyone in research played these games, that this was just how things worked, and by the time I realized how wrong it all was, I was already implicated. David Kim looked at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. Dr. Rios, I need to be very clear with you. Insurance fraud is a federal crime. Wire fraud is a federal crime. Misuse of federal grant money is a federal crime. If you participated in any of these activities, you're looking at serious prison time unless you cooperate fully. I'll cooperate. I'll testify. I'll do whatever you need. I can't carry this anymore. David picked up the USB drive. I'm going to review this with my team. If the evidence is as strong as you say, we'll offer you immunity in exchange for full cooperation. That means testimony, documents, wearing a wire if we need you to. Are you prepared for that? Yes. Good. Because Dr. Mitchell is about to find out what happens when the truth catches up. The evidence on Ethan's drive was devastating. 3 years of emails showing Jonathan explicitly instructing staff to falsify billing codes, forge patient signatures on consent forms, and misrepresent the use of grant funds. Spreadsheets detailing hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent insurance claims. Slack conversations where Jonathan joked about creative accounting and working the system. and video files. Ethan had recorded several conversations with Jonathan secretly on his phone, where Jonathan threatened him and other researchers. One conversation stood out. Jonathan: Ethan, we need to talk about your loyalty. Ethan: Dr. Mitchell, I don't understand. Jonathan: You asked questions about the NIH budget at yesterday's meeting, in front of the compliance officer. That was unwise. Ethan: I just wanted clarification on the equipment line items. Jonathan: What you wanted was to make me look bad. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop asking questions. You're going to complete your research project, get your letter of recommendation from me, and move on to your next position. Or, pause. Or I can make sure your next position doesn't exist. I can make sure your name is associated with the ethical violations in this lab. I can make sure no institution in the country will touch you. Do you understand? Ethan: Long silence. I understand. Jonathan: Good. Now get back to work. David Kim listened to that recording 3 times. That's witness intimidation. That's obstruction. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. He looked at Grace. Ms. Park, your client's divorce case just became a federal criminal case. We're going to need to coordinate our efforts. What's the timeline? Grace asked. Fast. Now that we have Ethan's cooperation, we'll move to secure additional evidence, subpoenas for hospital records, bank accounts, emails. We'll interview other witnesses, and then we'll present everything to a grand jury. I'd estimate we'll have indictments within 60 days. Will this affect the custody proceedings? It should help Mrs. Mitchell's case. A man under federal indictment for fraud and witness intimidation isn't going to look like a stable parent. Dr. Patricia Reeves completed her evaluations on December 19th. I'd spent 4 hours with her over 2 sessions: clinical interviews, psychological testing, review of records. She'd asked about my childhood, my relationship history, my mental health, my parenting. She'd observed me with Emma, watched how I handled crying and feeding and diaper changes. She was thorough, unflinching, fair. Jonathan, according to Grace's sources, had been significantly less cooperative. He'd tried to control the evaluation, lecturing Dr. Reeves about psychological theory, explaining why standard assessment tools didn't apply to someone of his caliber. He'd refused to complete certain tests, claiming they were beneath his expertise. Dr. Reeves had documented all of it. Her report arrived on December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas. Grace read it first, then called me. Sarah, you need to sit down for this. I sat. Dr. Reeves found no evidence of postpartum psychosis, postpartum depression, paranoid ideation, or any other mental health condition that would impair your ability to parent. She notes that you exhibited, Sarah, you need to sit down for this. I sat. Dr. Reeves found no evidence of postpartum psychosis, postpartum depression, paranoid ideation, or any other mental health condition that would impair your ability to parent. She notes that you exhibited appropriate emotional responses, demonstrated strong attachment to your daughter, and showed clear, logical thinking throughout the evaluation. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. What about Jonathan? Grace's voice took on a different quality, satisfaction mixed with something darker. Dr. Reeves identified significant narcissistic personality traits with manipulative behaviors. She documented his attempts to control the evaluation, his grandiose self-perception, his lack of empathy when discussing the impact of his actions on others. She specifically noted that when asked about you, he showed no genuine concern for your well-being, only concern about how your instability affected his reputation. Will the judge consider that? Sarah, this is the gold standard. Dr. Reeves is recommending primary physical custody to you, with Jonathan having only supervised therapeutic visitation until he completes a comprehensive psychological intervention program. She's citing concerns about his ability to prioritize Emma's needs over his own ego. I started crying, not from sadness, from relief so profound it hurt. There's more, Grace said gently. Dr. Reeves interviewed Olivia and Maria as collateral sources. Both women described identical patterns of manipulation. Dr. Reeves concluded that Jonathan exhibits a consistent pattern of exploiting power differentials to control and manipulate vulnerable individuals. That's going in the court record. When's the next hearing? January 8th. Full custody and divorce hearing. But Sarah, the U.S. attorney, is moving faster than expected. They're presenting to the grand jury next week. If indictments come down before the hearing, this case is essentially over. Christmas Day was strange. I spent it with Emma at my sister's house in Connecticut, surrounded by family who'd rallied around me once they understood what was happening. My mother held Emma and cried, apologizing for not seeing the signs earlier. "He was so charming," she said. "So successful. I thought you were lucky to have him." "So did I, Mum." Jonathan spent Christmas alone in his hotel room. His mother had issued a terse statement through her attorney that she was re-evaluating her support in light of new information. Translation: the federal investigation had scared her, and she was protecting her own assets. The colleagues who'd testified for him at the emergency hearing had gone silent. The hospital had placed him on administrative leave pending the ethics investigation. His practice had lost half its clients in 2 weeks. The House of Cards was collapsing. December 28th, the grand jury returned indictments. 18 federal counts against Jonathan Mitchell, wire fraud, multiple counts, healthcare fraud, multiple counts, misuse of federal grant funds, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, making false statements to federal investigators. Each count carried potential prison time. Combined, Jonathan was looking at 20 to 30 years. The news broke that evening. By morning, it was everywhere. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, local news, medical journals. Renowned psychologist indicted for massive fraud scheme. St. Albans doctor accused of exploiting patients and staff. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted statements. Former colleagues wanted to check in. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered we were friends. Grace issued a statement on my behalf. Mrs. Mitchell is grateful that the justice system is working as intended. Her focus remains on protecting her daughter and rebuilding her life. Jonathan, through his criminal defense attorney, maintained his innocence. Dr. Mitchell looks forward to his day in court and to clearing his name of these baseless charges. But I'd seen the evidence. I knew what was coming. The custody hearing on January 8th was anticlimactic. Jonathan appeared in handcuffs, having been arrested that morning when he failed to surrender his passport, as ordered by the federal court. His bail had been revoked after prosecutors presented evidence that he'd wired $50,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands, the beginning of a flight risk. Judge Brennan took one look at him and turned to his attorney. "Mr. Chen, does your client understand he's currently in federal custody facing multiple felony charges?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And he's still contesting custody?" A long pause. Then Robert Chen stood. "Your Honor, Dr. Mitchell would like to withdraw his custody petition. He agrees to voluntary supervised visitation pending resolution of the criminal matters." Just like that. No fight, no arguments. Judge Brennan turned to me. "Mrs. Mitchell, do you consent to supervised visitation for the father?" Grace nodded to me. I stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I want Emma to know her father, but only in circumstances where she's safe." "Understood. I'm ordering primary physical and legal custody to Mrs. Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell will have supervised visitation 2 hours per week at a court-approved facility. Dr. Mitchell is also ordered to pay child support per state guidelines and to maintain health insurance for the minor child." The gavel came down. I had my daughter back. The trial took 8 weeks. I wasn't required to testify. The case against Jonathan was built on documents, recordings, and the testimony of Ethan, Olivia, Maria, and a dozen other witnesses. But I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching justice unfold. The prosecution was methodical. They showed the jury exactly how Jonathan had stolen from federal grants, defrauded insurance companies, manipulated vulnerable students, and obstructed investigations. Ethan's testimony was devastating. He walked the jury through 3 years of fraud, explaining how Jonathan had created a culture where ethical violations were normalized. He played the recordings of Jonathan threatening him, showed the falsified billing records, demonstrated the paper trail of stolen grant money. Olivia testified about the coercion, the manipulation, the way Jonathan had used his power to control her career and her body. She described how he'd convinced her that falsifying consent forms was standard practice, that their relationship was special. Maria testified about her experience years earlier, the pattern of grooming, exploitation, and intimidation when she tried to leave. She'd brought her therapist's notes documenting the trauma. The hospital compliance officer testified about the scope of the fraud. Over 3 years, Jonathan had stolen $847,000 from federal grants and insurance billing. The defense tried to argue that Jonathan was simply a brilliant researcher who'd made some accounting errors, that his relationships with students were consensual, that the government was overreaching. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all 18 counts. Sentencing was in April. The federal guidelines recommended 15 to 20 years. The prosecution asked for the maximum. Grace had prepared a victim impact statement for me. I stood at the podium in the federal courthouse, Jonathan sitting 20 feet away in Prison Orange, and I read, "Your Honor, Jonathan Mitchell stole more than money from me. He stole my sense of reality, my confidence in my own perceptions, my financial security, and nearly my daughter. He used his professional expertise not to heal, but to manipulate and control. He exploited young women who trusted him to mentor them. He defrauded federal research programs that were trying to advance mental health treatment. And when he was caught, he tried to destroy me by claiming I was mentally ill. But I'm standing here today. I'm whole. I'm strong. Boing. And I'm speaking not just for myself, but for every woman he manipulated, every patient he betrayed, every researcher whose work he corrupted. I don't ask you to show him mercy. He showed none to any of us. I ask you to send a message that power and professional credentials don't place someone above the law. That manipulation and exploitation have consequences. Thank you." Judge William Torres, the federal judge presiding, reviewed the presentencing report for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Dr. Mitchell, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen fraud cases, violent crimes, organized criminal enterprises, but I've rarely seen someone use their education and professional standing to cause such systematic harm. You were given extraordinary privileges, advanced education, professional credentials, positions of trust. You used those privileges to exploit vulnerable people and steal public funds meant to advance scientific knowledge. The presentence report notes that you've shown no remorse, that you continue to blame your ex-wife and your colleagues for your situation, that you view yourself as a victim of overzealous prosecution. That attitude demonstrates exactly why a substantial sentence is warranted. On the counts of wire fraud and healthcare fraud, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. On the counts involving misuse of federal grant funds, 10 years to run concurrently. On the counts of witness tampering and obstruction, 5 years consecutive. Total sentence, 20 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, 20 years. Jonathan would be 60 years old when he got out. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, his freedom gone. The marshals led him away. He didn't look at me, but his mother did. She sat in the back row, aged 10 years in 6 months, and our eyes met. She nodded once, an acknowledgement, then she left. The civil case settled 2 months later, with Jonathan in prison and his assets subject to forfeiture for restitution to his victims. There wasn't much to fight over. I received full ownership of our brownstone, primary custody of Emma, and Jonathan's agreement to not contest the divorce. His practice was dissolved. His share of the partnership was liquidated to pay restitution to defrauded insurance companies and research grants. His pension was garnished for child support. The hospital established a $2 million fund for his research victims, compensation for the students and assistants he'd exploited, and restitution to patients whose consent had been violated. Maria Solis received $150,000. Olivia Tran received $100,000 and a letter of recommendation from the hospital that made no mention of the scandal, allowing her to complete her PhD at NYU. As for me, I received something more valuable than money. I received my life back. 18 months after that night in the hospital hallway, I stood in a community centre in Brooklyn looking at a room full of women. Some were survivors of financial abuse. Some had been manipulated by partners who used gaslighting and psychological control. Some were recovering from relationships with professionals who'd exploited power imbalances. Therapists, doctors, supervisors, mentors. All of them were brave enough to speak their truth. I'd founded Voices Reclaimed 6 months after Jonathan's sentencing, using a portion of my divorce settlement and donations from supporters who'd followed the case. We provided free legal consultations, therapy referrals, support groups, and advocacy for women navigating the intersection of abuse and professional misconduct. Olivia Tran was our first program coordinator. Maria Solis designed our curriculum for recognizing and documenting manipulation. Dr. Patricia Reeves served on our advisory board. And Grace Park provided pro bono hours every week, helping women who couldn't afford attorneys navigate complex divorce and custody cases. Thank you all for being here, I said to the group. I know how hard it is to walk into a room and admit that someone you trusted hurt you, to say out loud that you were manipulated, controlled, or abused. Our culture tells us we should be ashamed, that we should have seen the signs, that we should have been smarter or stronger. I looked around the circle at faces that reflected my own journey. But I'm here to tell you it's not your fault. Manipulation works because it's designed to work. Abusers don't target weak people. They target trusting people. And there's nothing shameful about having trusted someone who didn't deserve it. A woman in the front row started crying. The woman next to her took her hand. My name is Sarah Mitchell. 18 months ago, I discovered my husband had been systematically stealing from me, gaslighting me, and trying to take my daughter away by claiming I was mentally unstable. He was a renowned psychologist, brilliant, respected, trusted by everyone who knew him. I could have stayed silent, could have taken a settlement and moved on quietly, but I didn't, because staying silent meant he could do it to someone else, and that was something I couldn't live with. So I fought. I documented everything. I found witnesses. I built a case. And I won. I paused, looking at each woman. But here's the thing. Winning looked different than I expected. It wasn't just a courtroom victory or a prison sentence. It was rebuilding my sense of self. It was learning to trust my own perceptions again. It was becoming someone who could look at her daughter and say, I protected you. I fought for you. I refused to be silenced. That's what we do here at Voices Reclaimed. We help you rebuild. We help you trust yourself again. We help you find your voice and use it. Because your voice matters. Your story matters. And you deserve justice. The room broke into applause. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me, to share their stories, to ask for help, to simply be heard. I listened to each one, took down contact information, connected them with resources. The last woman in line was young, maybe 24, with haunted eyes. Mrs. Mitchell, my therapist, I think he's using our sessions but he's so respected and who would believe me? I took her hands in mine. I believe you. And we're going to help you. Here's what we're going to do. Emma's second birthday was in June. We celebrated in the backyard of our brownstone, the house that was fully, legally, indisputably mine now. My sister was there, my mother, Grace and her family, Olivia, Maria, Dr. Reeves. Emma toddled around in a purple birthday dress, smashing cake into her face, giggling at everything. She looked like Jonathan, same dark hair, same sharp features. But she had my smile, my determination, and she would never remember the fear, the courtroom battles, the man in prison orange who'd tried to destroy her mother. She would grow up in a house where truth mattered, where manipulation didn't win, where women lifted each other up instead of being silenced. Grace found me in the kitchen, refilling the lemonade. "How are you doing?" "Really?" I thought about it. "I'm good. Better than good, actually. I'm free. No regrets about going public, about the trial. None. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd taken that first settlement offer, if I'd just walked away quietly with some money and custody. Would it have been easier? Probably. But I wouldn't be me. I wouldn't have voices reclaimed. Maria and Olivia would still be carrying that trauma alone. And Jonathan would still be out there, doing it to someone else." I looked through the window at Emma, surrounded by people who loved her. I used to think revenge meant making him hurt the way he hurt me, but that's not what this was. This was accountability. This was justice. This was making sure the truth came out and that he couldn't hide behind his credentials anymore. Grace smiled. "You know what I love about you, Sarah? You never wanted to be a victim or a hero. You just wanted to be honest, and somehow that was more powerful than either." 3 years after Jonathan's sentencing, I was invited to speak at a legal conference about professional misconduct and domestic abuse. The room was full of attorneys, judges, advocates, and survivors. I stood at the podium with Emma, now 4 years old, in the front row, colouring quietly while my sister watched her. "People ask me all the time, how did you do it? How did you find the courage to fight someone so powerful?" I began. "The truth is, I didn't start out courageous. I started out terrified. I was a new mother, financially dependent, professionally isolated, and married to a man who was systematically destroying my sense of reality. When I first saw him with another woman, my immediate thought wasn't, 'I need to divorce him.' It was, 'Did I really see that? Am I losing my mind?' That's what gaslighting does. It makes you doubt your own eyes, your own memory, your own sanity. But I had one advantage. I trusted my daughter more than I trusted my fear. I knew that if I didn't fight, she would grow up watching her father manipulate and control her mother. She'd learn that powerful men get away with anything, that women should stay quiet to keep the peace. And I couldn't let that be her legacy. I looked out at the audience. So I documented everything, every conversation, every transaction, every lie. I found allies, lawyers, investigators, other survivors. I built a case brick by brick. Even when everyone around me said I was crazy, even when his attorneys tried to use my postpartum status against me, even when I lost friends and faced public scrutiny. Because here's what I learned. The truth is powerful, but only if you're brave enough to speak it. Evidence is compelling, but only if you're patient enough to gather it. And justice is possible, but only if you're stubborn enough to demand it. I paused, finding the words I'd been building toward for 3 years. Jonathan Mitchell used his professional expertise to manipulate and exploit people. He stole money, corrupted research, destroyed careers, and tried to take my daughter from me. He thought his credentials made him untouchable. He thought his charisma made him invisible. He thought his power made him invincible. he was wrong. Because in the end, the truth doesn't care about your degrees or your reputation or your connections. The truth is just the truth, and when you shine a light on it, when you document it, when you refuse to let it be buried, it wins. I looked directly at the camera recording the conference. If you're listening to this and you're in a relationship with someone who makes you question your own sanity, who controls your finances, who uses their professional status to intimidate you, hear me, you're not crazy. You're being manipulated, and it's not your fault. Document everything, find allies, trust yourself, and fight. Because you deserve a life where truth matters, where manipulation doesn't win, where your voice is heard. I took a breath. Jonathan once told me I was too emotional, too unstable, too weak to handle the truth. He said I needed him to make decisions for me. Today, I run an organization that's helped 300 women escape abusive situations. I've rebuilt a career on my own terms. I'm raising a daughter who will grow up knowing that women don't need permission to be powerful. So here's my message to every person who's ever been told they're too weak, too emotional, too crazy to be believed. I looked at Emma, who'd stopped colouring and was watching me with her father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. The people who try to silence you are afraid of your strength, not your weakness. The people who call you crazy are terrified that you're seeing clearly. And the people who say you'll never win are betting that you'll give up before they have to face consequences. Don't give them that satisfaction. Document, ally, fight, win. I stepped back from the podium. Thank you. The room rose in a standing ovation. But I was only looking at Emma, who was grinning at me with frosting still on her face from her birthday cake that morning. That night, after the conference, after the interviews, after the networking and the thank yous, I sat in Emma's room while she slept. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell, you don't know me, but I was at your talk today. My husband is a surgeon. He's been doing things, financial things, and I found some messages. I don't know what to do. Can you help? I looked at Emma, peaceful and safe in her bed. Then I texted back, yes, I can help. Here's what you're going to do first. Document everything. 5 years after Jonathan's sentencing, I received a letter from him. It was forwarded through his attorney, carefully reviewed by prison officials. Completely unexpected. Dear Sarah, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to respond. But my therapist, yes, I'm in therapy, court-mandated, says I need to acknowledge the harm I caused without expecting anything in return. So here it is. I was wrong about everything. I told myself I was smarter than everyone else, that rules didn't apply to me, that I could control people and situations through sheer force of intellect and charisma. I manipulated you, betrayed you, tried to destroy you when you threatened to expose me. I used my professional knowledge, the very tools meant to help people, to hurt people. I exploited students who trusted me. I stole from research programs meant to advance mental health. I tried to gaslight you into thinking you were crazy to cover up my crimes. I have no excuse. I had every advantage. Education, opportunity, support, and I chose to use those advantages to harm others. You were right to fight me. You were right to expose me. You were right to refuse every settlement offer that would have kept the truth buried. I took 20 years from my own life through my choices. But you took your life back. You protected Emma. You helped other women who were going through what I put you through. That's courage I'll never have. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I was, what I did, and I'm sorry, Jonathan. I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a folder labelled Emma's History for when she's old enough to understand. Because someday She'd ask about her father, about why he wasn't in her life, about what happened, and I would tell her the truth. Not to poison her against him, not to make myself a hero, but because she deserved to grow up in a world where truth mattered, where accountability mattered, where women who spoke up were believed, not silenced. I wrote one line on the folder, a note to my future daughter. Your father used his intelligence to manipulate people. I used the truth to protect you. Choose truth, always. And then I closed the folder, put it away, and went downstairs where Emma was waiting, wanting to show me the picture she'd drawn at school, a picture of two people holding hands. That's you and me, Mama, she said, beaming. Forever and ever. I picked her up, held her close, and smiled. Forever and ever. Truth and love. That was enough. That was everything. He used psychology to bury the truth. I used the truth to bury him. When they try to silence you with credentials and power, document everything. When they gaslight you with authority and reputation, trust yourself. When they say, you'll never win, fight anyway. Because justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the truth costs something.